We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome everyone to Shipwrecked Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This podcast network. I'm your host today, Kurt North, and with me again for the third week in a row is Matt Latham to discuss the 3 Million Years documentary series that has been on Dave over these past few weeks. This week's episode is called Playing Pool with Planets, and it aired on the 20th of August on the 2020 on the Dave channel. Matt, it's been a week. How are things?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. Can't complain that much. I mean, well, the weather's better. It is quite windy. I think we're in the middle of Storm Ethel that's hitting Birmingham. So, but other than that, things are okay.
Good. Well, it's I've just literally come off a video calling kind of app that we use in the Xcast for the X-Files Xcast, and the X-File crew, Chris Carter, David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, and some of the producers and stars have done a little fundraiser for I think it's some sort of American kitchen kind of a fundraiser type thing. So they've all put together the lyrics, or it was a competition to put lyrics together for the X-Files theme tune, and then they've gone and sang it all. It's got a lot of in-jokes. It's quite funny, and we've responded quite well to that. So that was about an hour ago.
Oh, cool.
And so it was quite good. Having said that, the singing is a lot to behold, put it that way. It's not the most in tune and not the most in time either. So it's not going to go up the charts. You know, it's not going to make number 14 in like Tongue Tied did back in 1993, really. But we'll see. But yeah, so that's generally today has been more of a case of for me just chilling out really. I've got a day off work, even though I've been called in tonight for something, which is just a caretaker kind of role tonight, just going in and looking after the place, and rewatching this documentary. So. Without further ado, as we've done each week, we're keeping it fairly loose on these documentaries. What did you make of the final part then, Matt?
I think it was the best one out of the lot in terms of the content and stuff. There was quite some interesting stuff in it, certain pieces, and it was quite nice to see him delve into like some other aspects that probably don't get seen as often. I think I think it kind of overshadows, skips over a few more of the interesting bits that probably would have been a lot more interesting to be scrutinised. But again, I think this is an all general purpose documentary that kind of did its job. And I can't complain that we've had like 3 hours of general stuff, but it does feel like it did with the others, that they're kind of like cut up like highlight reels from DVD extras and aired them together. But I
mean, the most obvious one is backwards, wasn't it? The where he does the speech backwards, and it plays that for the first. It says for the first time on UK television, this is what he really said, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I was like, well, yeah, but anyone who's watched Red Dwarf and seen some of them, if you haven't, I'm not saying I'm the most well versed person in Red Dwarf history to know every single in and out, because I don't, but everyone who's a fan would probably know what he says in that backwards scene, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So it's so I think it's walking a fine line, like we said in previous. What do you think was missing then? If you would have had your way, what would you have liked to have it delved into in a bit more depth?
Probably the stuff they definitely didn't want to do, which was probably stuff that probably would have been slightly more critical of the show, yeah. Like for example, the Chris Barry's holiday during season 7, a lot more to do with like the law of Chansky, and I think and pretty much they covered bits in the guest actors, and considering they had him as a talking head for the previous 2 episodes, they completely forgot about Matt McDonald and Hollister.
Yeah,
which I was kind of like a bit. Oh, okay. If I was him, I'd probably be a bit cheesed off. But
Yeah, it did that. I did note that actually, the fact that there was you have someone actually there to talk about his role, and they didn't really go down that route, which was interesting in itself. You briefly mentioned Kachansky there. What did you make of the little section that we got of them? Obviously, it wasn't what we would like to have seen, but at least they did touch upon it, and they did touch upon the change in from Claire Grogan to Chloe Annette, and the British accent it obviously changed. Now they don't ever reference that, and it's the same with, I suppose, Star Trek. No, it isn't the same as Star Trek Into Darkness with Alice Eve, who plays I can't remember her name now. I'm going to get killed by the Star Trek lot, but Carol Marcus, and who's American in The Wrath of Khan, but then it then gets to the retooling of it in Star Trek Into Darkness, and she's a British woman. They can do that from a timeline point of view, because it's a different timeline. She might have been born there instead. But they just briefly touch upon that, and I know that Red Dwarf doesn't really adhere to stuff like that anyway, but they do briefly talk about the Chloe stuff and the Claire stuff. What do you make to that little bit then?
I mean, again, considering she was technically a main character and they've covered Holly, I would have thought they would have given a bit more of a emphasis on how much it kind of changed the dynamic for a bit. But in fact, I think quite a lot of Series 8 was quite different as well. But I'm assuming that was just down to time more than anything.
Yeah.
Because that was like the biggest departure from everything else.
Do you know that strikes me? And then you can have a think about this question. I don't think we've seen any footage from Series 8 at all in this documentary. I don't remember seeing any.
You know what? I think you're onto something there, yeah.
Because there's even Chloe's was in season 7. It looks at season 7. I don't think they've, even like I would say with, did they with the salute at some point? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they did.
Yeah,
I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised with that. Yeah, I mean, they briefly mention Back to Earth. Very, very, they kind of brushed that. They kind of they mentioned the interesting bit. The interesting bit about having Craig Charles play Craig Charles and himself and stuff. But they completely brush over, the fact that it was filmed differently. That dimension about the relationship with the studio audience, it was missing from that, as well as Series 7. The words runner and blade were not mentioned, and often Rip weren't mentioned either. But that was. I mean, I got a feeling it was probably because I think the majority of it was a lot more complimentary and positive, and that's probably parts of the production history, or the cast probably have views that they didn't quite like certain parts of that. How it kind of how that was created or something. So that's probably why it wasn't brought up. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's interesting as well that they actually say now we found that new 90-minute format, which tends to make me think that we're not going to get a season. If we're going to get something else now, it's going to be more in the form of Promised Land more than what we have with seasons 11 and 12. Yeah. That's the way I read that. Yeah, I saw that bit as well, because the one thing, I mean, okay, we're jumping way ahead and a bit here. So, Mark, if you're listening, cover your ears.
Well, I did speak to him. We recorded yesterday for Summer Season 2. And I did speak to him, and he hasn't listened, and he will not listen. He has stressed that he will not listen. And we need to stay away from any. He even mentioned it backstage, didn't he, to you, that we might be doing something at Christmas, potentially a quiz. And he says, no, nothing from Dave, please. Okay. So he's being really strict with us.
So he's not going to listen to this for a long while. So if I can safely say that the Cat's probably my least favourite of the ensemble, I'm not going to I'm going to be alive for a good while. That's correct.
You'll be all right to the end of the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Until he listens to this.
Yeah. This is like this. Maybe we should do a podcast like this every between every series, where we'll cover something in the later seasons, and it's just diss at Mark.
Yeah.
But he's not going to listen to it.
Yeah. What was the original point I was going to make? Oh, yeah. I think the interesting thing I thought was particularly with the 3 million years, was that it felt like they had an art, a plot, but there was kicking in Series 13 ideas into to pad it out. So like, and I'm wondering whether like then like if they went for that kind of thing again, they probably have the ideas that would have been separate episodes, kind of combined into one thing with the guise of it being a feature length story. But I'm not going to put that's for a discussion for another time specifically. But I always found that quite interesting when this, as you said, that they kind of honed in on the 90-minute special format as a either Rob Grant or Doug Naylor. I can never remember which one stayed.
I think it's Doug stayed.
Yeah,
Doug Naylor stayed.
Yeah, because it was him who mentioned that 90-minute format.
Yeah. And what I liked as well, actually, that I didn't realise this, that Dave had come to them to ask him to get him back in costume to maybe do a couple of like documentary style things. Like I think Crichton does it in one of the Smeg Up videos, doesn't he, where he's actually playing himself and they go off on one. And he kind of goes through the tape, says, "Oh, there you are, and look at these silly idiots," kind of thing. Which is probably what the idea for was originally with Dave, but then Doug Naylor basically went up to them and said, "Well, why don't we do some more Red Dwarf?" I mean, there'll be a lot more to it than that, but it is interesting how it sounds like they're a bit more forward in like saying, "Well, we could do this again if you wanted to," kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing as well, because they had because that led to him talking quite a bit about a few of the guest stars from like the Dave era, and like I don't want to say higher caliber, but more recognisable faces, or at least got some. And I was watching that, and I'm like, and I suddenly realised there's probably episodes of Series 12 I don't think I've seen. So, because I remember seeing what's her name from Called the Midwife.
Helen George.
Yeah, Helen George. I think I've seen the Johnny Vegas one. I've definitely seen the James Buckley one, because that's the one where they're all in the Crichton suits. But I'm not sure I've seen all the Dave ones, considering that. But considering they went through quite a few of the like more modern day guest cast.
Yeah, I had this I actually mentioned it on the whole reason why we've got this podcast is because of Mark and myself talking about Red Dwarf on his Don't Mention the C Word when the pandemic started to hit. And I was like gushing about Red Dwarf. I loved it. I loved some of the Dave stuff. The Dave stuff was fantastic. And I never mentioned season 12. And it was just not in my head that season 12 had happened, even though I knew it was filmed. And part of the reason why I remember talking about that was because I knew it was filmed at the same time. 11 and 12 were filmed at the same time, but split up over the year. So it took a year before it came out. Then I've watched them, and we watched myself and my partner watched season 12 over the last maybe couple of weeks. And she said, "I don't remember this," and I was like, "Do you know what? I don't remember too much of this. I remember parts, but I don't remember all of it." And it is funny, and it's good going back to watch them all. But for some reason, season 12 doesn't seem to land in my head, and obviously yours at the moment as well. And whether or not it had that, it doesn't have that feeling of, maybe because it had been 2 or 3 seasons into the new regime now, and we're used to seeing it, but it just doesn't have that kind of pull to remember too much about what went on.
Yeah, which is weird because I can remember a lot of 10. There are parts of 10.
Yeah.
And,
Loads of 10.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think 10's got some of my favourite moments, which I think are up there with, which should be up there with like changing the light bulb and all that kind of stuff. I mean the whole moose setup in Trojan, like, is perhaps one of the they hit gold in terms of coming back with that one. But it makes sense that they'll focus on the Dave stuff because it's the Dave era. It's Dave that's probably funding the Promised Land. It's funding the money for this as well. So I'm not surprised that it kind of focused on that a bit as well, particularly that's.
Yeah, I mean, the Helen George thing, I mean, I watched that one recently with M Corp and stuff, and, season 12 by far is not a bad season. It's really good. It is really good, and, I think after watching it many times, it'll probably get better. But the episode you were talking about with Johnny Vegas has another alternate Rimmer, And it's like it's Rimmer's like kind of, I can't remember exactly how they word it now, but it is like in a like sort of demon kind of thing of like, you know, oh, you can't do that and you can't do this and you're not good enough to do that. You know, and he's in a voice kind of set coming out. And I did not remember it when watching it, but I remember watching the episode. So it just, for some reason, it just doesn't catch in the mind. Although watching it again, it's like, right, I think after a few watches, I'll probably will remember it quite well. And what I'll really, this is not about season 12 because we'll talk about season 12 eventually, but season 12 overall, every single episode is like lined up as if this is the final season because they keep going back to callbacks. And perfect example, which we'll move on to, is Talkie Toaster, because Talkie Toaster comes back and Dave Ross starts talking about this in this documentary, and that's a perfect example of like it's almost like 12 is like a lap of honor, because every single episode has something. It has Holly coming back, it has Talkie Toaster, you know, there's scenes in the original bunks in Red Dwarf as well. That, you know, it's literally like a lap of honor. But yeah, David Ross talking about Talkie Toaster was a nice little touch as well. I know we mentioned it was good to see him a couple of episodes ago, like, so it was good to see him.
Yeah, and like I did quite like how he said he seems to be known more for Talkie Toaster than like playing Shakespeare and.
Yeah. Yeah, it's typical. It's like Patrick Stewart, isn't it? And Ian McKellen.
Yeah,
but on a much lower level. But at the same time, it's you know, the fact that, you know, you would want to be known for Richard III, like he says, or playing Hamlet or whatever, and you're just renowned for playing either Crichton or Talkie Toaster, which is just funny. And I like it. He sees the humour in it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So they kind of like touch upon themes again in this episode. They look at science and they look at alternative realities, and it did I asked this last week whether or not Ace Rimmer, you can't not have Ace Rimmer in it, and maybe they'll go down the alternative reality route, which they did. So what do you make to the touching upon the Ace Rimmer kind of stuff? I mean,
I was glad they did, and again, it was kind of, I can probably see why they didn't do it in terms of adding in when they talked about Dwayne Dibley, but yeah, I was quite good. I mean, like it was pretty, I quite like the fact that it seemed, I think it was just a case where it seemed like Chris Barry just didn't want to play a smeggy version of Rimmer, so they wrote him a version. But I mean, I mean, again, cut into the Ace Rimmer thing, the miss out Series 7 again. And but I did quite find the fun when they hinted that they created it because Chris Barry said he didn't want to play. He wanted to play less pathetic. Yeah. Because I ended up catching a bit about the episode Blue on YouTube, and it says apparently they wanted Craig Charles said he wanted to get off with someone, so they wrote in that gets off with Chris Barry. Yeah, and again, so they kind of missed that bit, elements of it when he went off to do Ace Rimmer. I would have thought they would have mentioned that, but then again, tied into the fact they seem to skirt around the fact of
he was leaving.
Yeah. Again, and like in terms of like in terms of progression for the character, but again, that's tied into a very big opinion I have of the character of Rimmer, which I've briefly mentioned in previous episodes, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again in terms of his own character arc. But again, yeah. But at least it was, I mean,
you will at some point when we get to 2022, when we're kind of heading into that territory. I'm sure we'll talk about Rimmer in general, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. But one of the things that even like my partner always says about Ace Rimmer is that he does embody that so well. Because he does, you know, he does come across as like, and Hattie Hayridge just says it as well, and she's like, oh, it's kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? And just the fact that he can change his characters so well, and the voices that he uses, and Ace was just one of those characters, was just, you know, it was a gold mine for Ace. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if you ever, Chris Barry's performance of Ace, did you ever see A Prince Among Men?
Oh,
it was when it's Chris Barry playing kind of an ex-Geordie footballer who's gone into business, and it is basically a hybrid of Ace Rimmer's confidence with Arnold Rimmer's kind of disregard for people.
It rings a bell, but it's not something that's jumping out at me. But it does ring a bell.
It's not his best. There's a reason it only lasted 2 series. It's not his best work. It's now British Empire, so let's say the least. But again, if anyone's not watched the British Empire, and you want some evidence of just how different Chris Barry can be, definitely check that out, because like when you see the same actor playing Arnold Rimmer, Ace Rimmer, and then Gordon Brittus, you cannot fathom it's the same person. So
no, it would have been great to see him back to earth. Gordon Brittus meeting Arnold Rimmer. that would have been fantastic. Another thing as well, which has me howling. I mean, I know we were talking about season 12, that you don't remember too much of it. But if you have seen it, you must have remembered Mr. Rat, because Mr. Rat is one of my favourite ever things that's ever happened in the show.
See, I do not remember that at all.
Right, okay. Without spoiling it too much, it kind of goes through into the episode anyway, but he's jumping through realities, Rimmer. And obviously it's just the way Mr. Rat's played is just like, yeah, and I just absolutely adore it. And one of my favourite parts of it is the way he keeps like looking from left to right on the episode. I'm sure when we get there it'll be fantastic to talk about, but it looked really hot under that costume, didn't it? The fact he's wearing that fur coat and stuff. I mean, I've never seen Danny John Jules look that bad. I mean, and he still looks great, don't get me wrong, but when he takes that hat off and the actual rat head off, and you see how much he's struggling, you can only imagine how much he's struggling for his thing, and the fact that he's, they're all saying that they want to come back and do it, and they'll take that kind of thing just as a testament. But we also get into Gunman of the Apocalypse as well, and this goes back to what you were saying in both episodes of the last 2 weeks, is that it's the best part of it seemed to be when they're talking at Pinewood Studios. And again, this was another one where they were talking about this, and then they talked about the fan stuff as well. That they seem to like, you seem to get more out of these these interviews, and the fact that they were just generally talking amongst themselves. I mean, this one particularly with the horses and Chris Barry kind of like, talking about Craig's horse being docile, and Craig slapping it and stuff like that, and everyone running to the gates to close them so they didn't get onto a main road and stuff, and the Riviera Kid and all that. I mean, it really kind of that was the central part of the episode for that. There was probably the best part.
Yeah, and it was again. It says that I probably would have just watched 3 hours of them just sitting talking about it. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't going to happen, but I would have thought, I was near the end, I think it was coming up again when I was talking about the fans and stuff. Part of me was kind of wondering whether David Tennant was just going to come up and just start chatting to them as well, but I think it was just, that was just me wishful thinking, but it's just that, at least because it's something new, because it's improvised, because it's kind of improvised, just like voyeur of a conversation between 4 people who are just really close and have a good relationship with each other, and you just there going like, oh, you could have just watched more of that. I remember thinking like, how there's this sudden uptrend following Josh Malina's West Wing podcast, where actual cast members or people who like walked in the background in one episode have now started doing rewatch podcasts. And there's the 2 characters from Robert Duncan Neal and the person that plays Harry King and Harry Kim in Star Trek Voyagers. They've started one as well, so there's quite a lot of them popping up now. Because Cyril Lofton and Aaron Eisenberg did is it Aaron Eisenberg?
From Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, because they were doing a Deep Space Nine podcast, which is slightly had to pivot its original premise.
Tricia Helfer's doing one on Battlestar Galactica as well, I think. So there seems to be a lot of people that are kind of using the time like this now. So.
Yeah, because the big one is best friends with Zach Braff and Donald Faison going through Scrubs, and I mean, and I was just thinking, I'm like, yeah, can someone just shove a mic in those the four people's faces and just get them to talk about what they remember the episodes, and basically it'll just be like an hour of Robert Llewellyn going, oof, I don't remember this for the first two series, but yeah, and so I'd probably just love to have seen more of that. Again, that's probably the last time you probably hear me say that, because I've said it for about 3 weeks in the trot. But
no, that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. I mean, the stories were good as well. The fact, they were talking about, the kids that have come in, and this seems to be a thing in general over, over all TV shows, that there's, people will come and say how much the show has changed their life and stuff like that, and it seems to be universal that whether it be a Friends podcast, not for podcasts, that's stupid, but whether it be a Friends TV show or the X-Files or Red Dwarf or something simple as Neighbours or something, that there was something that actually people will say that you've changed my life by talking about this subject or by doing this and that and other. And it's nice to hear that that's the same in Red Dwarf as well. The fact that people are taking the time and they get to know these people. I mean, being in the Xcast and the X-Files forum and stuff like that, and seeing people that you've talked to online, that this thing that we talked about before with Annabeth Gish, who played Monica Reyes, is in there, and Sarah was saying on the video call before, saying that, did she record that in the same room that we interviewed her in? It's stuff like that. The fact that you can get so close to them now. Whether it be virtual or together, like when I went over to the Chicago to see some of the stars of the X-Files and stuff. But it's all that kind of thing, the fact that you can able to speak to them, direct contact, and the fact that this has such an effect on people as well is just really interesting to me. And the fact I like that they did humanize that section. There was like the fan section that they did with the some of the far out there ones. The people with tattoos, which is absolutely amazing. I find that incredible. I find it really good.
I did quite like cause you get the impression, you always get the impression that they were kind of humbled by quite a few of the things they was talking about. And like they had, because they was talking about the young lad who was, I think he was like disabled from the neck down, who I'm talking about, the way talking about it, apparently, like, he kind of leapt out and, like, Robert Llewellyn was holding him whilst Craig Charles sat in his chair. And I was there going, bloody hell, that's a bit strong. But then apparently he says, like, but he loved it because Lister sat in his chair. And I was talking about the international bit, and the statistic that I thought I might have to double check because I thought it was quite low, was the fact that they said it would air internationally in 25 countries. Now, to me, that seems quite low. I would have thought it would have had a bigger outreach than that. But then it led to that kind of anecdote that Craig Charles was saying to the other three, where it was like, because he said, "Oh, I was told that like the East European bloc had a problem with racism," and he was walking out, and like people were staring at him. I was like, "Oh bloody hell!" And like he got to the taxi cab, and the taxi cab was staring at him, and Craig Charles was saying, "God, have I just increased the black population in Croatia or something?" But then they says like Dave Lister, and like basically, and like he kind of said it shocked him that everyone kind of recognised him in Croatia. Like a load of taxi drivers just recognised him, and it's just, again, he just seemed like in awe that happened, which is which is quite, and it's quite, and it did make me think about the fact that the term household name is someone who kind of like seems to be there all the time, or household name, or in terms of British culture, household name is, it's not exactly A-list, but you probably recognise a household name more than an A-list celebrity, because there's probably a lot more relatability to them. So you could, household names are probably in the UK. Any international listeners probably might not understand a few of the names that I'm saying, but for example, Holly Willoughby, Philip Schofield, Moira Stewart. Matthew Wright, just random names I've just said that I'm assuming that you recognise every name I've said. But are quite well known. Piers Morgan, for lack of a better name, but he embodies he embodies. I mean, it's not always a good thing being a household name, but again, those are names who are quite recognisable and names that if you said to people in the street, they know who they are, but they're not. But you will never class them as A-list.
Yeah,
and
because I don't think Danny John Jules would probably. We've talked about this in the podcast on recordings that haven't come out yet, but the fact he was on Strictly. The fact that he is and he isn't. Craig Charles is probably, and Craig Charles and Chris Barry are the big two really. And Robert Llewellyn, I suppose you've got the stuff like the stuff that he's done as well. But Craig Charles, I think, is probably the widest purely because he's been on Coronation Street, that he's been a DJ for so long, that he's got a good DJ following. He's got a big following that actually go to his sets. I'd say he's from that side as well, and he's been on Coronation Street, which is a national like TV show. And on top of that, Red Dwarf, so he is probably the biggest. And then you've got Chris Barry, who's obviously pretty much the same ilk. You mentioned like the British Empire, the fact that he's been in Red Dwarf for so long that he even appeared in Tomb Raider. Even though if that's the butler, but they are the kind of household names. But I really like what Danny John Jules said towards the end of it when he was like saying, "We don't, you're not scared you'll get typecast." And his reply was, "Well, when would I ever get to play a character like the cat again?" Yeah, and I thought that was really nice. That I thought, do you know what? There is that question that's held over people. Craig Charles has managed to avoid it. To be fair, Chris Barry's does what he wants to do and when he wants to do it. And Chris Barry seems very kind of level-headed when it comes to stuff like that. Yes, you mentioned about the season 7 stuff about him wanting to leave, and there's various aspects and various behind-the-scenes stuff that you could potentially get into. But he kind of he does what he wants, and Robert Llewellyn has just gone and done what he wants to do as well. He's done his offshoots, his TV shows. He's been doing whatever he wants, and I think that that typecast thing is potentially more like a bigger American. As you say, an A-list kind of aspect of like you're being typecast as that romantic comedy star or that sci-fi star or whatever. And I don't think that they just feel like it's more of a posse, more the boys from the Dwarf kind of, ensemble more than anything else.
Yeah, but I was thinking if you was walking down the street and then you've got Tom Cruise and Craig Charles walking towards you, I mean,
well, I definitely need to walk towards Craig Charles more than Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But for various different reasons.
Yeah, but I think there's probably a lot of people who probably say they probably know or have more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not feelings. They probably gravitate towards Craig Charles or know Craig Charles more because they feel like they've seen him more than perhaps Tom Cruise. Because they have that kind of relatability to them that feels like they're just on that level rather than being A-list, and I think less pedestally, so they feel like on a less pedestal type thing, or
more reachable,
approachable,
approachable, yeah.
So, but I did quite like the fact that they felt really appreciative of the people that went to see them, and people see them and know them, and they seem to recognise, and they recognise like people that come up several times, and they have memorable fan encounters. Like for example, like they mentioned a Japanese girl who kind of fainted right in front of Craig Charles.
And obviously, and it's amazing when you look at stuff and things come straight back to you. That when they said about the kid that said, "What's the smeg mean?" and then we showed the video clip, and I was like, "Oh, remember that?"
Yeah,
and it completely left my mind. It would never have come up in any of my conversations, I don't think, unless I actually saw that clip again. And when he said it, I was like, "Oh, I remember that." And then they showed the clip, and I was like, "Oh God, it's so brilliant! It's so brilliant." So I mean, I think the. Another thing, Ryan Cage talks about the fact that the Hitler, and then this got me. Do you remember the Hitler episode? Do you remember that one or not?
I think so. Is that series 11 where they go?
No, I think it's 12. I think it's 12.
That's the one where they have. Is it Caligula's there as well?
Yes. Yeah.
And like where they go to, and like they've cloned kind of like the evil people and removed the evil from them.
That's right. Yeah. But then they actually turned around to say that rather than the song they were doing, they were going to get Toto's Africa. which I thought, which was like, wow. And it was only like literally quick once over when I watched it the second time that they approached obviously many people or a few people about the songs, and they were like just getting no's basically because you don't want Hitler singing your song. And then the way Craig Charles went and says, yeah, but he was cured. Said, yeah, but I don't think it really works that way. But I mean, I like the way that they actually comes to it. But Toto's Africa is a particularly favourite song of mine, so it was a shame that wasn't put in there.
But yeah,
and what really shook me was the fact that one of the things they said in the towards the end of it is that Red Dwarf has now been on in all 5 decades.
Yes, they said that, and I was like, "Oh, hang on." I started counting in my head because I remember something.
I did.
Because I remember something.
I did exactly the same.
Because I remember reading something similar where, like, it was like apparently Kylie Minogue has had a number 1 hit in 4 decades, and I was like, "Wait, what?" And I'm trying to figure. And I just remember counting that up. But yeah, the 80s, 90s, noughties, 10s, and then the 20s.
Yeah. That is some feat, and it took me back, as you say. I was like, oh right, 80s, 90s, no, oh they have I, I mean, they haven't skipped a decade. They've got at least something in every decade, which is incredible. And then the final kind of like thing is when they talk about Moonlight and from the Promised Land, and when we do get to the Promised Land, that scene is probably one of the most emotional scenes that I've seen in the entire show. I really like that conversation that Craig Charles does there. And I think that goes to that 90-minute thing that Doug Naylor was saying about the new form factor that they can do. You can, with the more longer form storytelling, you can have the jokes, you can have the things put in there, but you can also have scenes like that, which they've done before. But I think they really kind of went out with it. The fact that, they've built this up with Rimmer and obviously the moonlight thing, you can't have moonlight without sunlight. You can't, without one or the other kind of thing really works. So that I mean, we jumped over other bits as well because that gets towards the back end of the episode. But right at the beginning, they bring in Dallas Campbell, which is an interesting choice. For those people who don't know, that he's the he used to be on. I think he's been on Sky at Night, and it was something else that he's been on. It completely escapes my mind now what he used to do. It was like a scientific thing where they used to try out different experiments and stuff like that.
Brainiac?
It was something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was Brainiac, but it was something like that. And obviously he's got a science background. And I actually looked him up on, not on IMDb, on Wikipedia. And he went to school literally right next door to somewhere that my band play quite a lot. It's about an hour away. I didn't realise he was that's where he was from. So I was like, oh right, I know exactly where he's from, which is good. But the real scientific theories and the fact that they're saying there was real science, there was theoretical science, there was made up science, and then we talk about white hole. And then we touch upon Crichton's exposition stuff as well, because Crichton he suddenly realises that he's the exposition piece. And my other half actually mentioned this while we were watching it yesterday, that there's no reason for Crichton to be sitting down on a tabletop. And then you see it in other episodes where there's a scientific, this kind of thing happening. I think there's one where he does, he's jumping, I think it's the Rimmerworld one, where he's got the pad and they keep moving to different places because he presses the button, he moves, and he's sitting on top of a bed. And it's like, you don't really, unless he's like physically sitting down on a chair, like say when he's trying to say banana and stuff, you don't really see him like sitting on beds or sitting on tabletops. But that's obviously done for effect. And but she just picked it up and went, no, you don't see Crichton doing that very often. I went, that's very true.
It's probably because Robert Llewellyn takes about an hour to sit down. I mean, that was something that they mentioned. Yeah. That's something they mentioned last week. It takes him a while to like transition from standing to sitting. But yeah.
Well, I think in those particular responses, I think because he's the one doing the exposition, that to make it more obvious that they've changed positions rather than just changing scene and have him still standing up. Because if he's sitting down, it's visibly different to him just standing up somewhere else.
Yeah,
you see what I mean?
I think he was mentioning about the fact they brought up that he'd become the exposition bit. I remember reading that was probably a factor in why they wrote out Holly.
Yeah,
because a lot of the stuff that they used Holly for was exposition, and if you've got Crichton Kryzina does all that, then you don't really need Holly anymore, which makes sense. And there's probably, and as much as I love Holly, that probably explains why Series 6 feels a lot tighter as a whole, because they kind of figured out that they can give Crichton the exposition and the knowledge and scientific background and stuff. So, I mean, they didn't delve into why they wrote Holly out again, which is probably slightly more critical aspects that they probably didn't want to get into. I did find that quite interesting that they brought that up.
Yeah, and another thing that they in regards to, like, obviously that scene, actually, the white hole stuff is the fact that it was completely made up, and then the scientists are pretty much going. Dallas actually said that, if you were trying to explain it, probably watching Red Dwarf's probably the best way of doing it. They actually, they just logically thought that, and people were thinking, well, a white hole is theoretically possible, and probably the best explanation is watch that episode, which I thought was quite good. The time they talk about time slides, I didn't I'm saying I didn't realize. I think I did know this, but it was a bit of a surprise that it was the Craig Charles's brother that played his younger self. But I've got a feeling I did know that, but I've forgotten that he played himself. But I definitely didn't know that Judy was Crichton. Robert Llewellyn's wife was Camille. I didn't realize that at all.
Yeah, same. I never noticed that either. That was
yes, that was a nice little touch that I personally didn't know. I mean, we're probably both getting shouted out right now, but never mind. But Nish Kumar actually said something as well. The fact that, and this is to do with backwards. So when they talk about backwards, now again, want to be conscious that we are going to be talking about backwards in general. I mean, backwards to me is like the TV sitcom's equivalent of Inception. The fact that things had to go through to record it. There were some technical aspects which I really liked, and they didn't really explain it too much. But when Ed Bye was talking about, you've got to remember to go from, if I was going from a wide shot to a close shot, that I would have to do that in reverse. I'd have to go from a close shot to a wide shot. So listening to little bits of that, and then you have to think about what is the next scene. Is the next scene forwards? Is the next scene backwards? And the touches that they needed to make there. But the way Nish said it said that what you've got to do, and I really appreciate you saying this actually, is that you have to have a world where you touch upon it and then make people believe or think about the wider context, that there's other stuff beyond it that you don't see, and there's so much more detail. And I think the backwards thing with the big crunch, which is I think it's Katie Brand, wasn't it, who says, it's all about the scientific nature of, like, they thought, I think there's many different theories whether or not the universe will just expand into nothingness, and eventually everything will cool down and everything will die out a slow and painful death over billions and billions of years. And this is like crunch thing of what backwards is, which is the world's being pulled back in and time is going backwards. And Dallas talks about that backwards and forwards as well. But Nish's comment about the bigger aspects and Ed Bye's like backwards and forwards, which shot to choose from was interesting, as well as the scene in the lake, which I didn't know about, Craig Charles's stuff as well.
Yeah, that I think might have been in one of the extras in the Series 3 DVD, because I'm pretty sure that was brought up at one point, I think.
Right, the fact he was he couldn't get out.
Yeah. I'm sure that rung some familiar bells anyway, but
right.
Yeah. So again, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It was nice to bring it up because I don't remember it. I mean, it's been a long time since I've watched those documentaries, I must admit. But yeah, the fact that he had to be pulled out by Peter Ragg was something like a bit scary. And I talked about the Truman Show recently on another podcast, and Jim Carrey, he had issues in that when he was in the boat scene towards the end, where he was actually in danger or actually drowning, and they did the camera crew and that just were completely oblivious to it. And eventually, obviously, things change and stuff, but these sometimes, these things, the simplest of things can actually cause major problems. I mean, can you imagine like being stuck underwater for that long and, being stuck? Yeah. It's not a nice feeling. Yeah, and that basically, I think that pretty much, unless there's anything else. Oh, yes, I want to talk about something. I do want to talk about something. I want to talk about music, Matt.
Yeah.
I want to talk about music. Did you manage to catch any songs? Or I believe that you may have, it may have just, because I only just remembered on the second viewing to listen to it, but did you catch any songs?
I didn't, no.
And what were the songs that we were looking for?
The ones that we have on, the ones we said in episode 1.
And in the very first,
Wonderwall, Slashed on the Back of Anger, Common People.
No.
Wannabe.
Nope.
No Doubt, Don't Speak.
Nope.
Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Nope.
And Ebenezer Good by The Shaman.
Nope. So, so we didn't do very well. But what we did get is Around the World by Daft Punk.
Mm-hmm.
We had Robot Rock by Daft Punk. There was a shuffle during the Johnny Vegas scene. I'm not sure if that was original music. And if anyone does know that, please tweet at Red Dwarf Pod, because I was really interested to know if that's a song or not. It seemed really familiar and I couldn't place it. And they don't have the music credits at the end of the credits, which is a bit annoying. They had Acceptable in the 80s it was Calvin Harris. Yeah. I Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas.
Mm-hmm.
Muse was Starlight.
Oh, yes, I remember that one.
A Sky Full of Stars, Coldplay and whoever they did that with. I think, was that just a Coldplay? I think that might have just been a Coldplay song, but produced by somebody. And that was it. That's all I had. So so there was the return back to the popular music thing, but a lot less the kind of thing. But I do like the fact they use Robot Rock, and the first bit used to always Crichton. So there was thought in it. There was thought in it. Anything else then in your notes, or anything that you want to bring up that I might have missed?
The one thing I wanted to bring up was, I'm glad that they did, because it is great, was in the guest star section, they talk about Ainsley Harriott. Peering as a Gelf.
Oh, yes.
And then they bring up the Red Dwarf Night special of Can't Smeg, Won't Smeg, which they said was an improvised in-character thing, and that was great. I've not watched it for ages, but and I'm probably going to rewatch it and end up being rubbish now. But I remember seeing that Can't Smeg, Won't Smeg, and I'm glad they brought it up, because I think they're in character, but they take the mick out of. They're in character, but at the start they kind of take the mick out of the fact that Ainsley Harriott played a Gelf.
Yeah, yeah. I do. Do you know what? We've talked about this between us on the on Shipwrecked and Comatose posse about potentially covering that actually Can't Smeg, Won't Smeg. I'm sure we'll do that at some point. But seeing Dwayne Dibley do the cutting of the onions, I completely and utterly forgot about that. And again, it was one of those like I said earlier, where something just jumps back at you. When I saw it, I was like, oh, I completely forgot about that. And I remember howling with laughter watching it, because then it was back in 1998, so I would have been 18 when that came out, and I just howled with laughter at that point. I do remember that vividly after seeing it pop up on the screen. I thought that was great. Another thing as well, you talk about the Rimmer's Holiday, which is something I was going to miss. There's a couple of bits actually that are coming back to me now. There's Rimmer's Holiday. Obviously, we don't get the Arnold Rimmer song, but we do get the Barbershop Quartet, which I thought was brilliant. I always love it when they do stuff like that with Rimmer, because Rimmer does really. I mean, rim. So I like that, and the Timothy Spall was really interesting as well. The fact that he couldn't get his lines right, and they used a couple of outtakes, outtakes from that as well. I thought that was really intriguing.
Yeah, I think it was quite funny as well. Like Robert Llewellyn was saying, because he's an actor, he's a proper actor, and he was getting really anxious about getting his line stuff. And Robert Llewellyn, trust me, mate, you're in the right place. Trust me. Don't worry about it. No. I need to get into character. And I just love the fact I was, trust me, just enjoy it. I think that was probably kind of related to the fact that they kind of last week, where they mentioned they kind of embrace the smeg ups. Yeah, and just because I think it's part of the experience for the audience. Whereas so Again,
yeah, and you can imagine him coming in cold and not really knowing that. You can imagine going in as, like, say, like Helen George, because he also says about Helen George being completely baffled that you've come in from a TV show like Call the Midwife, it's based in the 50s, to this Apple kind of like dystopian, change in, she's an AI intelligent woman, not giving credits to Craig Charles. It's a completely baffling world to him. And Brian Cox as well is saying the Smeg, and stuff like that. The fact that they're not immersed in that world, and the fact that, and I think that you can say this about, certain TV shows, other TV shows, that sometimes I think fandom can get a bit too much, but this is no way in Red Dwarf's fandom. I think Red Dwarf is a completely different kettle of fish. And I'll name one in Lost. Did you watch Lost?
Yes.
Okay, so the woman who plays Penny, which is Desmond's wife,
Sonia Wagner.
It's something like that. Yeah, she's just there just to play her job, just to do her job. She goes in, reads the lines, goes home, and she got riled for it because the fact that people didn't, because she was asked questions and didn't know the answers to them. And it was like, I'm just there to like read my lines and go home. She wasn't really interested in the subject matter. She was just wanting to get paid, which is, by any stretch of the imagination, is fine. Harrison Ford mentioned it in Star Wars, the latest Star Wars. He said, I don't know what I am. There's stuff like that. But fandom really get toxic with that type of thing. But the difference with Red Dwarf is that they all are like, they all enjoy it. They all enjoy the experience. And it's like going into a circle. So you can imagine Helen George or Timothy Spall or whoever may come in, they have to get into their world and actually work with that. Where if you're someone like Timothy Spall, you're wanting to do a job and you want to do your job well, and it's just a completely different mindset.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, I think if you've got if James Buckley, for example, is probably a lot more settled into that kind of thing, because I mean, like, I think I brought up the interview he did with them last week. Yeah, so he kind of just like clicked with them. So it was kind of, because he got the vibe of the set and the camaraderie, and kind of fitted in. Whereas, so, and I think he was a fan as well. I think him being a fan probably helped. And saying that, like, where you've got actors who are kind of into and probably have a genuine interest in what they're playing around just walking on and doing a job. I mean, if you think about the fact that David Tennant is narrating, David Tennant again, I think I might have mentioned this last week, in that I'm not 100% sure of if he's publicly been said as a Rebel Dwarf fanboy, but I mean, he's still and will openly talk about Doctor Who, because I think he actually watched it post when he left, so he carried on being a fan of it. So, and he will be interviewed with it. I mean, he was in a Zoom call with Jodie Whittaker and James Corden, talking about the show. And he's still able to talk about it. There's like video of him on there talking about his role in it to this day, and being asked if he'll come back for the 60th. And there's that. Pretty much the opposite from who you was talking about, just Sonia Wagner from Lost, where you can kind of tell when a central actor just is also is invested in what he's doing, in what they're doing around just saying the lines, and that passion kind of comes out. And I totally get that. I mean, I think that's quite endearing for people who like what they're doing. I think it works better for the types of shows that will get that. So there's probably so I think particularly genre shows get that a lot. Fantasy shows get that a lot. Science fiction is pretty much science fiction. I think you're the outlier if you don't get that, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who doesn't get that is a failed show. Any successful show from science fiction has that element to it.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got to look at some of the shows that, may not have been on for long, but have got cult status, or, they've only been on for so long and they're not really world renowned, and, they have such a big fan base.
Yeah, like Firefly, or I think Firefly's a big one, but I think the biggest one I think I remember. But again, like, and down to that, because I think Nathan Fillion had really genuinely enjoyed doing that show to the point where I think he used to ad-lib references to Firefly in Castle. I think there's an early series too where he goes out to a Halloween party and he's dressed up in Mal Reynolds' costume, and like he's going, "Where are you going as? I'm a space cowboy. Didn't you wear that like 5 years ago? Because shouldn't you get over it?" He goes, "Yes, but I like it." And it's that kind of like where the, I mean, either that or the actors pretty much fake it very well. But I really doubt that. I mean, you do get the impression with the Red Dwarf 4 that they genuinely love what they do, and I think you can tell where. And again, if we link back to what we was talking about near the start, where they was talking about how they interact with the fans, and that, I think there's a self-awareness of just how much it is, and I think the impression I definitely got from this is that they're aware of the impact that they've had. They're humbled by it, and I think part of that is one of the reasons why they are still willing to do it. I mean, they love it, they love doing it, they have fun doing it as well, but they probably are aware of just how much it has an impact on other people when they can't continue doing it, because the law of diminishing returns is thrown everywhere, where like things that carry on past their sell-by date. But I think there are certain things where I think kind of, okay, like we might not, the Dave episodes might not be in the heyday of the BBC shows in the heyday, like of the series 3 to 6 era, but you never get the feeling that they're past their prime when they come back and they're older. I'll argue that Alan Partridge is a similar character, where when as a character gets older, the character gets better. Whereas, perhaps Red Dwarf, it's probably not the same thing slightly, but particularly, bless him, where Chris Barry should still look like he's in his late 20s. Yeah. But I think like they're in a position where as the characters get older, that the show never loses something, because getting older kind of becomes part of them.
Well, the whole like old gits in space was mentioned, and that literally hit a chord with me. I was like, yeah, that's basically what it is now. It's like, we watched them grow up, watch them be louts. We've watched them, we watched Lister be a lout. We've watched Rimmer trying to get up there. We've watched Rimmer kind of get to a point where, in season 12, in the ones where he's jumping around, that he ends up going, do you know what? I'm actually better where I'm at. You know what I mean? Where he's, rather than like, he's literally got to a point where he's like, I want to better myself. And then he goes, do you know what? I'm going to go back to my original universe because I'm happy. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of like, where they are now. They are old gits in space, just having adventures and having fun, which I think is right for the show, really. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And even like sort of the stories, and they touch upon this as well. We mentioned M-Corp before. So, if you don't quite remember it, so basically when he had that vibrator, Lister starts to lose sight of anything that's not run by M-Corp. So example, say if I had a Samsung phone and you had an iPhone, and you were obsessed with iPhones, that you would only ever see an iPhone, you wouldn't see my phone in my hand. That was the premise of it. You would have like a perception filter on, if we're going down a Doctor Who route. So if you have a perception filter on, you just physically wouldn't be able to see that item. And they talk about the things like the 3D printing and stuff like that, which they're touching upon, and just taking it one step further. So in the 80s, they were basically making stuff up, and some of it, Holly's basically Alexa's what they said. But on top of that, they're looking at things that's happening now and just taking it 2 or 3 steps further. I mean, that 3D printing joke was just brilliant. The fact you can 3D print different people and 3D print the crew, and it goes wrong because you get a paper jam. It's so it reflects on us now. That might well date quicker than we would expect, because technology is literally speeding up so much. But it's still at this time, it's still good things to touch upon in the twilight years of Red Dwarf.
Yeah, there's the joke about DVDs, because they had VHSs in the first the first lot of series, and he goes, oh, these were DVDs before they decided to go back to VHSs, which is And but
well, yeah. I mean, on top of that as well. I mean, this is a spoiler alert for season 2. And one of the episodes we talk about the cat and Lister listening to a screwed up tape, and it's like, oh, this is really good. It's this is brilliant. But it's Lister's cat's holding a CD box, and then they say tape. So it's like, well, it's one or the other, but it's in the future. But you forgive stuff like that. But it is interesting how they are taking those the technologies of now and just taking it that 1 or 2 steps further.
Well, I'm watching DS9 at the moment all the way through, and it is quite interesting the fact that you've got the 90s version of the future where you've got, I mean, like they predicted the kind of like iPads and stuff, but then they've got kind of written reports that they've had to hand in, that they hand in rather than like audio.
Send.
And it's just kind of weird how like the futuristic technology gets dated by the fact that better things have improved. So
it would, I've never actually thought about that, but it would be really interesting to just have a world for, instead of paper, they just have tablets, but whichever one you pick up, it has your stuff on it. Because it's literally cloud, isn't it? So you literally just go, right, there you go, hand that in.
Yeah.
It would never happen now, but but yeah, I didn't think of that, because I was thinking you were going down the route of some of the Google glasses that was a few years back, which they were trialing. I know they're trying to bring that back a little bit now, because Cisco wears these glasses for the periscope when they're on Defiant and when they're on one of the ships.
Yeah.
One of the
Jemadar ship where there's no view screen.
Yeah, so they use the screens, and a lot of people have memed that to say, Deep Space Nine predicted the future when Google glasses were first coming out. But anyway, this has been a wide and varied conversation today, Matt. We've talked about Firefly, we've talked about Deep Space Nine, we've talked about Alan Partridge, we talked about
Lost.
What else have we talked about?
Lost.
So we've done all right today. So anything else that you want to mention just before we wrap up? And this will be it for a while, actually. So and I'll just briefly go over some stuff for those listeners to let you know what's going on next. Anything you want to bring up before we close for today?
No, I think it's time for the admin.
Okay, time for admin. Excellent stuff. I'm going to 3D print some Mark Adams, I think, and get him to do some extra work, because I've done 3, he's done 2. But he is going to come back and do the RPG game. So you're going to see a feature on that in the coming weeks. And then we are just getting prepped for season 2, as I mentioned before. We're in the middle of recording. In fact, we've just finished recording yesterday. So 20th of August 2020, we've finished recording season 2's coverage. So that was fantastic. So we had a good time doing that. So that'll be coming to you late September, early October. The plan at the moment is to be in late September that will come out after the RPG. So there'll be a bit of a break. So just bear with us for a few weeks, and then we'll get this special out to you. And then obviously we'll be starting with season 2. So we'll look forward to seeing you all there. And thank you for everyone for listening so far. It's been fantastic. We've reached a milestone, and we've had over 1,000 unique downloads, which is amazing. We'd like to obviously thank everyone for getting involved, and hopefully that will grow as well as we get into the seasons. You remember to find us at Red Dwarf Pod, and by all means tweet at us if you need to tweet at us. And we should really reach out and get somewhere to contact us as well. I think that's probably the next step. Should anyone want to contact us, probably on the We Made This Podcast Network's Facebook group, I would have thought it's probably the best place to point people. I would have thought. Do you know is it just We Made This, Matt, that we need to search for that?
Yeah, it's the We Made This Facebook page.
Yeah, so the We Made This Facebook page, look for that on there, and we'll post stuff in there for you as well. So if you do want to get in touch, that's probably the best place for you to come and see us. So Matt, we'll be back for season 2. Which episodes did you cover?
Thanks for the Memory and Stasis Leak.
Okay, so that'll be fantastic. You'll find me pretty much on all of them, as always. But yeah, so thank you very much again. Thank you everyone for joining in. It's been fantastic. Matt, I know where you need to disappear now and off for a little bit of a chin wag with some friends. So that's all good.
At a distance.
So at a distance, at a socially distanced level, especially because Birmingham's on the watch list now. Mm-hmm. So just watch yourself. Mm-hmm. But where can people find you online if they wanted to get in touch with you on what you're up to?
Well, they can find me on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook under the Piccadis podcast, which is basically the URL /pickadisc, and which is my podcast where I talk to people about music, etc., etc., etc. And you can also catch us on my newer podcast, Ask Us About Loom, where myself and our Lord Commander-in-Chief, Tanya Black, talk about point-and-click adventure games.
Excellent stuff. And you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. Currently, there's nothing actually happening at the moment. The X-Files Fight the Future Minute has just finished. Or is just finishing. It's on the last couple of minutes and potentially the last special next couple of days. So we'll be back for the X-Cast for season 6. That'll be airing later in the year, as well as the prep work I'm doing for Millennium. So I'm doing the TV show Millennium, which again, that's another one of those TV shows. It's 3 seasons long and has a cult following. So if anyone does follow the Millennium TV show, you can find me. I'm covering the 3rd season at the moment, and you can find that at the Time Is Now pod. And I also do the Star Trek Picard pod, but that's obviously just on hiatus at the moment with season 1 being covered. But we may well be doing a couple of specials sometime in the future. And you can find that at Jean-Luc Podard. So thank you, everyone, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Look forward to hearing Mark on his RPG adventures. But until next time, remember...
Swear, and we made this. The Giddy Carousel of Pop.
Got the lyrics for Love Changes Everything, Climby Fisher. Cav's pulling a face at that one.
That is a banger of a song, though. Are you not in agreement about this?
I think you can predict my answer.
Oh, come on. What is wrong with you two? When you make a mixtape for someone now,
yeah,
do you put it on?
Oh, God, no.
What? Let me tell you, the ladies are going to dig it if you do.
Not the ladies I know.
Life's milestones.
All the way home one day from we were gone out for a Sunday afternoon. He told me I was going to have he was going to cook when we got back, and we were going to have bread and pullet.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard this joke, but all the way home, it's like, oh, it's delicious and blah blah blah. I was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to this. And we got home. He took a loaf of bread out of the bread bin, put it in front of me. I was just sat at the table. He goes, just pull that towards you. And I grabbed it, pulled it, and goes, there you are, that's bread and pull it. I couldn't believe I'd fallen for a joke. This was like 2 hours of him telling me how great this was. Just things like that, and silly little things you remember. I find it's never like the big things, it's always the little.
Observing the Pattern, a Fringe podcast.
What's funny is when I watched this episode a couple weeks ago, the official Facebook page of Fringe posted a still picture from this episode with the caption, "Will Olivia get her memory back?" So that was just kind of a funny coincidence that this episode was referenced the same day that I watched it.
Spooky. Very spooky.
Very, very Fringe.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at wemadethispod.